Welcome to the Rising Star Radio Show, where you'll hear interviews with independent artists along with their music. Discover what these artists are doing to make it in the music business, along with their unique perspectives as up-and-coming musicians. Now, here's your host, Mark Skoda.
Okay, this is Mark Skoda, and we're here this evening on Rising Star Radio with the band 13 Seconds of Silence, and I promise you this evening, folks, we'll have anything but silence. Welcome, guys. I've got on the line with me Powell and Matthew, Ethan, and Chris from 13 Seconds of Silence. Welcome to the show, guys.
Thank you for having us.
Well, it's great to have you on board. I know that you're a new label addition here. You've been the latest to sign with Iron Gate Records. That's been fun for us. I love your music. You're developing your sound and your feel. As we've put it, it's a mix of a punk rock sound, sort of with a refresher for the 2022. Tell me a little about yourselves as a band, and whoever wants to be spokesman can jump in here first.
All right, I guess I'll just give you a brief little history of how we started. I think when did y'all start playing instruments?
I would say the kind of how we started was me and Ethan used to have a two-piece band that he played bass and I played drums and sang, and then he just put a bunch of like distortion and stuff on it, so it kind of filled it out.
Right.
But then we did that for a while. But just maybe we didn't put ourselves out there or something. And then I forgot. It was a church bowling trip, right?
It was a church bowling trip. And then we were at Chick-fil-A. And I was like, and at this point I'd been playing guitar for about 5 months. And I was like, hey, do y'all want, because I'd always been complaining to my parents, I want to start a band. I can't find anybody. So I was like, hey, do y'all want to meet up at the church, just do a little jam session, see where this takes off? And I think it was our second practice, that's kind of when I knew, like, it's less about jamming, and we kind of wanted to make this like an official band.
So who were the two that started? This was obviously the two-piece. That was
me and Ethan.
Which is Matthew.
Matt, and Ethan. So the audience doesn't know this, but Matt and Ethan are actually twin brothers. And so, which is not unusual when you see, three sisters from The Warning and you got two brothers from the 13 Seconds of Silence. Maybe, you guys could have that kind of success and be touring the United States in a few years. So Matt and Ethan, you both were beginning to sort of form this band as brothers, right?
Yes, sir.
That had to be interesting as well, just because of the fact that you're twins. And I guess, did you finish each other's writing? When you were composing, did you guys, there's this whole twinning thing, right? You finish each other's sentence, you know what each other's thinking.
Yeah, actually, we do have a lot of the same kind of intuition on stuff. Like, that was one thing that kind of we did with the two-piece, is that we could go off on kind of like tangents, because we could just kind of like feel what the other person was doing. It was
right. So you decided at church, an epiphany, so to speak, and you decided to form a band, and who was next to come on board?
So then it was at a Disciple Now. It was
February.
It was February. Church is basically the reason that joined us. Do you want to tell a little bit about that?
Sure. I want to say I discovered when the band was in the making and they were now just getting established on social media, that I was like, oh crap, I thought that'd be pretty cool to be in. And at the time, I don't think they were really looking for anybody. But I had the thought in my mind how to get associated with them. So then another church event rolled around. I think Matt decided to kind of try out guitar and see where it would take them. And so they've been looking for a drummer. Me and Matt started talking, and we all got together at the event and discussed whether we should meet up and try to see if
right, and it was that
we can form.
And then it was that next Monday we did it, and by the end of the practice, I had already kind of decided that this was the step that we needed to take, and I personally feel once Chris joined, the four-piece and like four-piece versus a three-piece, that just amplified, and like helped us creatively, like that pushed us to
there was a lot more that we could do at that point.
Because I was going to say, like, one reason why I thought the thing was so valuable is because I was having a hard time, like, really singing out because I had to sit down.
Right. Mm-hmm.
So that helped me a lot.
So because you at that point you were playing drums, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So Chris, drummer, Powell obviously comes in as guitar as well. And who's lead singer now? Is that you, Matthew?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, that's what I thought. So you've got a very interesting vocal too. And I've listened to some of these songs. It's got a very sort of melancholy sound to it. Is that intentional? Or who's your influence for vocalists?
Probably my main influence for vocalists are probably, I mean, Kurt Cobain is probably the first.
Yeah, right, exactly.
Him, maybe Daniel Johns, maybe, and that's probably about it.
But probably some of that like back rough throat singing some of your songs from like Silverchair.
Yeah, that vocal distortion definitely comes from that post-grunge era.
Yeah.
Right. So you guys formed the band, and you've been together now as a formal band for just, over a year, I think. Am I right?
A little
like
bit.
10 months.
September 19th will be our 1 year.
Got it. Good. And, as you sort of decided to do music, I mean, you're there in Alabama, you're in a small town, you had this dream of forming a band. Clearly, as young guys, having gone through this with my own son, there's a whole question about whether parents are supportive of music or not. Did you guys find that your folks and your families were supportive of your efforts? Are they supportive of what you're doing now?
Most definitely so. My dad used to be in a band, and starting in the late 90s, they were a band for about 20 years. So this is something, basically he always tells me, he feels like he's able to live vicariously through me.
Right.
So he's definitely supportive of this, and he's with us all the way along, just giving us these things that they had to learn over multiple years and we're able to take from him without having to go through the struggle of it. He's given us that leg up, and it's really helpful.
They're also they help you a little bit with your recording, I understand, as well, right?
Yes, sir. His former bandmates, they helped us record Sonder.
Very good. Yeah, that's cool. So, as a band, you've been writing quite a bit. I know that you guys rehearse basically every Monday and try to write a song every week. And so you've been prolific in terms of writing. How has the maturation process been for your writing? Do you find yourselves sort of more locked into each other now? I mean, the kinds of music you are putting out, is that where you want to go? Or do you see more change over time? I mean, are you striving for something different, a different sound?
I think that the more we write, it's like the more we're forming into what I would have envisioned us being. It's like I think we're getting closer and closer every time to what I would see us being.
Paul, you and I have talked quite a bit via email. Are you sort of the lead guy in the band right now from a business point of view, or how are you guys formed as a team?
I would say that we're pretty roughly even.
We try to keep it pretty equal in terms, because that's the biggest thing we're scared of, the downfall of the band from inequality in it. So we try to keep it all, we're in all of this together. In terms of in emails and stuff, I cover majority of that, but we try to keep it, equal.
Yeah, I think that's important. I can tell you that when my son and we formed his band, which is now Skoda, the whole effort there was to ensure that everyone shares equally in all aspects of the band, and that the band partnership agreement reflects that. And that's really important because, as I like to say, if a guy gets off the bus with a couple grand in his pocket and the other guy gets off the bus with $100, those bands don't last too long. No. And if you're going to be a band, you need to be a band, and you need to manage the brand. 13 Seconds of Silence is kind of a very cool name. I love your album cover on Sonder. It's very eclectic looking. How did you come up with the brand name, 13 Seconds of Silence?
The story was it was actually kind of a funny story. It was, the story back when the U.S. pulled out of Afghanistan and the 13 soldiers that died.
Right.
We did that in honor of them.
Interesting. Wow. That's a terrific story.
And it was actually it was in a church service that our youth minister actually had a little piece of paper that said 13 Seconds of Silence on it to remind him to do that in reverence. And then we saw it just sitting there in the church on our Monday band practice, and we just saw it. I was like, yo, that's a cool name for a band.
And kind of finding a way to, honor those lives and keep them living on, keep their memory.
Yeah, that was, as you well know, politically, we are in somewhat desperate times. For young guys like yourselves to honor fallen soldiers is quite remarkable. And that story, I had no idea that you had taken that name from, frankly, a church service, and really reflective of what happened in the Afghanistan withdrawal. I'm grateful to hear that. In fact, I hope our listeners are as well. Do you have family also that is in military? Or have you had friends and family in military?
I mean, my grandpa was Air Force for the longest time.
Yeah.
Other than that, I don't really have that many service members in my family.
Majority of servicemen come from, I believe it's my my mom's side. I know on my dad's side, his grandpa, he was in a like a battleship explosion, and all his fellow comrades, like, they had to like swim back to shore. And so that's like kind of like the main story when I think of like family related to war. That's kind of like what sticks out the most to me, that story.
So you guys are actually also, it sounds like, very interested and very engaged in your faith journey as well through church.
Yes, sir.
And that, I think, is a good thing. I think in today's world, it is very difficult. As a man of faith myself, it's somewhat looked upon in this current age as being backward thinking, or even in a negative view, because as if we're judgmental and not allowed to have these feelings for those things that we believe. But I think it's admirable that you integrate sort of your feelings for your faith in your daily lives, and I think that's important. We see what's going on around us in the world, and we see all of the turmoil and challenges. And as young men, you are going to be taking over the reins at some point in time, whether it's through your music, whether it's through the music business, or as you are mature in your own lives, eventually perhaps have families of your own. And so it's important, I think, to understand what motivates you. And I think the fact that you are church going, the fact that you have faith, the fact that you honor the military, I think those are, some people would say today in certain quarters that's almost anachronistic, that it looks backwards almost. And yet I think it's admirable that you, as four young men, feel that way. How does that translate through to your music then? How do those things that you are engaged in your life, your faith journey, your patriotism, and frankly you're living there in Alabama in a small town, how does that influence your songwriting?
I feel like it honestly, our beliefs are most prevalent in Sonder. So I'll just kind of give you a brief on each song and what they.
Yeah, please. By the way, folks, Sonder is the first EP that's going to be released by 13 Seconds of Silence through Iron Gate Records, and that'll be out on the 15th, along with this show, the 15th of August. But go ahead, let's talk about that.
So Before the Dawn is more of the way I would explain this story is it's looking at America from what it was built on its foundation to what it's at now. In a time where all these horrible things are going on, God is the only way that we're not completely destroyed right now. And, just kind of that focus more on what we believe in terms of, like, I guess you could say, like, political. Like, we personally, like, don't believe in majority of the stuff that's going on.
Well, that's right. I mean, they would call that conservative thinking. I call it traditional thinking, right? It's those values that many of us grew up with, including myself, including my sons, as they're inculcated through your relationships with your family. So and yet we are under attack because those traditional values sometimes are seen as being problematic in this world today. But I challenge you, and I challenge those who feel the same way, to continue to embrace that, because at the end of the day, I also happen to believe that part of the reason we're still one of the greatest countries on earth, and with the challenges we have before us, is, frankly, there's a lot of folks here who still have faith in God and share that faith and frankly, live their lives through that faith. So that's admirable.
Ruins, that follows the story of Job and kind of it's almost like a summary of that whole story of Job. So that's what Ruins is. You Were Right is a story where there's a soldier, and in the beginning of the song, he's explaining to his mother before he goes off to war that he's not going to die and that he's going to make it out. And then by the end of the song, he's regretful that he didn't say goodbye to his mother how he should have, and that he ended up passing away in the war.
Powerful.
Crossroad is more about a character. Do you want to tell that one, Matt?
Yeah, I was probably the most primary lyricist on that one, but what I had done on Crossroads is that I made the story about, like, a guy, like, trying to decide, like, he wanted something to fill, like, his life's void, and he was, like, trying to decide whether Christianity was it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of what I based that story on.
And then Ignorance, that one was solely written by Ethan, so if you want to give a little explanation on that.
I feel like I could go for a while talking about it, but I'll say the simple explanation is talking about how sometimes intelligence can almost be like a hindrance to things because you overanalyze things.
Right. Too smart by half, right?
Yes, sir.
So that's a little bit about all of our songs.
So you're not a Christian band, but you have these Christian themes and these themes of sort of regret, as well as sort of challenges that are in our lives that are sort of informed by your Christian faith. Would that be accurate?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
I think that's good. I think, it's interesting. Obviously, you're a rock band. You're a punk rock band, grunge, I should say, rock band. And yet you are influenced and you have these themes. I think it's interesting. I had no idea, frankly, when I was listening to these, that Ruins would have been about Joe. But now that you say so, it's very clear to me. And by the way, you're in good company. The Byrds, as you may recall, took the song "Turn, Turn, Turn" from the Bible, right? So it's and that was from the 1960s. So there's been a lot of influence from biblical scripture in terms of music and in the modern era and in the classic era as well. So I think that's interesting. Ignorance, I think you're right. It's a song, and I'm going to play it here in a moment, and we'll talk a little bit more about it. But ignorance is really, sometimes you've heard the cliche, ignorance is bliss. I think sometimes because we are so overstimulated by all the news, by all the social media, by all the elements that are around us every single day, that it tends to drag us down. And so ignorance, not in the sense of being stupid or being uninformed, but simply ignoring those things which are there to bring us down, and focus on those things that we can change, and focus on those things that help advance our families, our communities, and frankly the culture at large. So I appreciate your view of that. Let's listen to this track. It is going to be released on the 15th of August along with the EP. The EP, of course, coming out with 13 Seconds of Silence, is Sonder, and this is one of the band's very interesting songs. I'm going to go ahead and play it, and we'll talk a little bit about it afterwards. So here we go.
Let's do it.
Universe.
So there you go. Bliss and ignorance. That indeed is the case, right? So that's sort of the inspiration around the song. When you're being overcome by all of the information around you, sometimes it's better to just be ignorant of that. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Cool. Great tune. I think that's cool. I'm looking forward to EP getting released here, and you guys are going to be making a video with this song that you're planning. Is that right?
Yes, sir. We're in the early stages of making the music video.
Very good. So, a lot of the things that you're doing as it relates to being a young band, a new band, is really building your craft. And I think that's also part of the point here. When you were signed and we signed you to Iron Gate Records, really it was about seeing that opportunity for evolution as a band. You hadn't hit the release yet at that point in time, and frankly, you are certainly continuing to build your craft and build your relationship as a band after just almost 1 year together. And I think it's interesting for me, certainly as someone who runs the business, to look at young guys like yourself, to be encouraging, recognizing that, look, this is a journey. This is not an overnight hit. I mean, there are very few of those that happen. But if you give people the chance and they work their craft and they're serious about it, and sometimes take the criticism both constructively and, frankly, some things you don't want to hear, as my son will tell me all the time, it's important to be able to embrace those comments and take them back into your music making and ultimately continue to improve that. Are you guys working as it relates to your craft on your musicianship? What are you doing there especially? Are you engaged in lessons? Are you doing online work? Or are you just practicing like heck?
I used to take lessons, but I stopped taking this week because I'm about to start college classes on the 15th. But I usually play a lot every day, and I try to write songs every day as much as I can and just try to hone in on that and my songwriting.
And then in terms of us being together as a band, we normally practice on average for about 5.5 hours every Monday, and then on Thursday we like to go to Matt and Ethan's house and try to record a little studio demo to get into that.
Well, that's great because you're doing a lot of work then. I mean, that is excellent to hear because it's tough. Everybody has lives, and I see it in everyone's experience with music. Oftentimes it's tough to be together a lot. And the old days of basically a band coming together, renting a flop house somewhere, working through their craft 24/7, living together, eating peanut butter and jelly every day. Those days don't happen too much anymore because we all are trying to achieve, as you point out, even going to college, and try to, I guess, manage this approach to being artists and crafting new music, and at the same time recognizing that you have to continue to educate yourself, and everyone has their life. So I commend you on the amount of time that you're putting in, because that is indeed a lot of time. What about fun? I mean, do you guys do things, hang together? Are there things that you do that are sort of team building, band building? What do you do? Or what do you do for fun as individuals? And
hey, this is Matthew. So I would say, obviously, when we have band practice and stuff, we usually go out to eat a lot of the times and just hang out and talk at a bunch of places. That's kind of the main thing we do. But then, and we'll just do that randomly sometimes and just have meetings and stuff. And I mean, I would say a lot of the enjoyment that we have comes from just, I guess, playing at practice even.
Yeah. The thing is, we're all a bunch of nerds about music. That's our fun, I don't know about y'all, but personally, I find my most enjoyment comes from music, and that's where I really have my outlet.
For sure.
That's interesting, and I hear that over and over again from different people. Whether that's an artist, if you're an artist, you just have to paint, right? It's what you do. If you're a musician, you have to make music. It's what you do. And it doesn't necessarily preclude anything else, but the reality is it becomes one of the most important parts of your life, and therefore it is not seen as work, and it's seen as joy. And in addition, it's the thing you want to spend all your time on because, honestly, there isn't anything else that's as interesting. It's not like you want to go out and play 9 holes of golf. That's when you're creating something. And the fascinating thing about music, and I tell this all the time to people, is the moment that you begin writing and the moment that you complete a song, you have done something that didn't exist before. Not necessarily in terms of guitars and drums and bass and all that sort of thing, but the reality is that you have created a new item, a new event, a new element that no one's ever heard before, and other people will. And I think that is one of the most interesting things about music, and what drives a lot of people towards music. And we're now in this day and age producing and releasing 60,000 songs every single day on Spotify. 60,000 songs. And so you think about all that music and all those genres being produced and being written, and the ecosystem that supports that. It's extraordinary. And so on one hand, it's really good news because we have so many talented people creating so much new music that's never been heard before. On the other hand, it creates challenges to break through, and therefore artists and bands in particular have to be focused on that niche and building their fan base and working to identify who those super fans are that ultimately will work with them. And I think that's no different for you guys. You know, you've been at this just about a year, and I'm sure that you're finding that process of finding those fans will begin now that you're releasing your music to all the various platforms. And of course, through doing things like Rising Star Radio, where we're talking to you about, you know, sort of what motivates you.
Right.
Yes, sir.
And that's the thing that about the 60,000 a day. It's like, wow, we have the opportunity to do this. Like, that's something that I feel that makes us as a band really strive to create good music. Is we have to, with that 60,000 people, we have to stand out. You know, I think that is what motivates us to make our music.
And I think, you know, it's also interesting, obviously, that you're sort of pulling together some of those influences from the past and bringing them into a more modern feel. You know, as I said, one of the reasons I do this show and one of the reasons we want to interview our artists, most people wouldn't understand, would not even have an inkling about what motivated you to put these songs into your first EP. They wouldn't have an understanding of how the influence of your faith, of your family, frankly, of the current events in America, even to your band name, the 13 Seconds. Most people would never imagine that. And so it's important to go beyond just releasing music. And one of the reasons that we do this show, one of the reasons we're talking to you, is to find out, to understand what's behind what you're doing. And I think that's really interesting. And I have to say, I'm impressed. One is, I didn't know that when we brought you into the label. And so for me, as the CEO and founder of Iron Gate Records, and then doing these podcasts and doing these radio shows, for me, it is always a way to get to know people better, to find out more, and to share that with audiences. And it's something that you, hopefully as a band, will promote to your friends, family, and others, so they can understand who you are a little bit. And, oh, by the way, you know, this is always fun for me. I get to talk all I want to do because I used to do talk radio in my past life. And I get to enjoy finding more out and teasing out that information from behind you. So where do you go from this? Have you got any gigs lined up? What's your next step with the EP release on the 15th? Are you going to be holding a release party? What's your plan?
The plan is to have a release party where it all started in our youth building when that finally does happen. But in terms of gigs, currently we don't have anything lined up, but we're looking to get some shows when the weather finally clears up and it stops being so hot.
Well, you know, I think you're all under 21. Am I right now?
Yes.
Yeah. So that's all. I have to tell you, that's a challenge as well. Even as I've said, anytime you're under 21, it's hard to get into some of the venues because they may be 21 and over only. But I would tell you, you know, find the pizza joint, find anywhere you can play and go play. Even if you've got to drag your drum kit along, a couple of amps. You know, get a decent microphone for the vocals, and then, you know, put a little kit together that you can travel. Because if you talk to those local places, you know, whether it's a small restaurant, they can clear a table out in the corner and do it for tips to begin with. You know, have some fun, because first of all, there's a couple of things that happen when you play out. First and foremost, you get to actually interact with a audience, and you can see how they respond to your music. Secondly, you can also find out financially how you're doing. If they tip you well, you're probably doing a pretty good job. If you get no money, well, then maybe you ought to say, well, what do we need to do to perform better and get people engaged in the audience? It's also a chance for you over time to, you know, build some merchandising. I think that's something we'll be talking about here. You know, you're going to get your merchandise store online here shortly, which you can then link to your website and sell your shirts and hats and all those sorts of things. And then finally, it's also a way that you guys can get tight, because when you're playing live, you have to be tight. You can't make the mistakes. You can't forget a chorus, or you can't forget an element of the music itself. You can always cover that up, of course, when you make mistakes. That's what bands do. They look to each other and they keep moving through it. But I think that's what I would encourage you to do, because as a new band, and now that you've got your first few songs out there, put it together with some of the other songs that you haven't released yet, and put together an hour show and say, look, we'd just like to come and play for an hour, and find that first place, find that pizza place, find that little restaurant, maybe find that restaurant bar that has a spot where you're going to know your people there in the local community, and talk to your people at church as well. That's a great way to find out and get introduced to places. But go out and play. I would encourage you to do that, because that's also a lot of fun. That's part of the entertainment side of this business. And as a band, you'll find that the feedback you get is really satisfying as well.
Right.
So as we close here, any other passing thoughts or final thoughts you'd like to offer?
I got anything?
It's always, wait, let me tell you. Okay, so here's the thing. Whenever you're in an interview, you always want to have that closer, okay? So as we sit here tonight, and I ask you, is there anything else you want to share? The answer would be, we're really looking forward to our EP releases on August 15th. So check it out on all the streaming platforms, Spotify, Apple, iTunes, etc., because Sonder is going to be in your inbox. See? Okay, so there you go. I just try to help you out. You always want to have that closing. And by the way, the same thing with your music. You always want to have that last song or that encore song. But guys, look, it's been a real joy getting to know you a little bit better tonight. I hope the audience is enjoying this as well. It's a way which we'll be doing this with a lot of our artists as we go through. And certainly, as you've just come on board, I really wanted to do this as sort of the opening show. So thanks for joining us. This is Paul Franklin, Matt Lena, Ethan Lena, and Chris Offit, all four of the members of 13 Seconds of Silence. Again, check out all the major streaming platforms. Their EP is getting released on the 15th of August. It'll be everywhere, and please check it out, listen to it, and provide some feedback to the band. Guys, thanks so very much for your time tonight. I really appreciate it. This has been great.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us for the Rising Star Radio Show on Iron Gate Records Radio, where the independent artist is the star.